In this episode of the Modesta Mahiga 360 Leadership Podcast, we're joined by Charles Washoma to speak on the topic of building a culture of accountability. Charles Washoma is a C-suite executive and consultant with over 20 years of business experience, and he successfully served as chairman, independent non-executive director, chief executive officer, managing director, country manager, general manager, and principal officer across insurance, reinsurance, Insure Tech, risk management, and consulting services, providing leadership and oversight for businesses with profit and loss and balance sheet sizes ranging from $10 million to $50 million. Charles is valued for developing strategy, setting vision, business planning, inspiring people to achieve revenue and profitability targets, ensuring proper governance, controls, and efficient systems, impacting organizational culture and performance, and forming lasting stakeholder partnerships. Charles holds certifications in the Chartered Director South Africa from the Institute of Director of South Africa, Chartered Property Casualty Underwriter from the Institute of the same in the US, Certified Risk Management Professional from the Risk Management Society in the US, Associate in Insurance Accounting and Finance from the Institute in the US, and a Certified Ethics Officer from the Ethics Institute in South Africa. Charles is also an Archbishop Tutor Leadership Fellow with the African Leadership Institute and the University of Oxford, and a fellow of the Crans-Montana Forum of New Leaders for Tomorrow. Charles, thank you greatly for joining us on today's episode of the Modesta Mahiga 360 Leadership Podcast. Charles, it's been an honor to know you and to have had the privilege to collaborate with you in the past. But please share your journey to championing governance and accountability with our 360 leadership community.
Thank you so much, Modesta. It's been an honor and a privilege to know you, collaborate, and interact with you over the years. And it's such a pleasure to be on the show. So, over my career, I've really seen how important governance, accountability, leadership, and clarity is for the organization across all levels, organizational, departmental, and individual level. And it's really driven me to be clear in my own purpose, and I view my mission as one to communicate messages of hope, to lead and inspire with others in building progressive, integrated, and productive communities. And he inspired me to be clear on my values, to be clear on the sort of culture that aligns with the mission and the vision that I have for my own life and for the businesses that I align myself with. And I've also grown through experience and, of course, even professionally pursuing chartered director qualification as well as various qualifications in ethics and compliance as well. So that's part of the journey, and also having experiences beyond my own sort of local cultural background and experience, traveling the world, getting to experience other cultures, learning from people in different contexts has been a real privilege for me.
Um, I heard you starting with purpose. I heard you starting with your values and your vision, and that's a very interesting response to a question on your journey to really championing and upholding governance and accountability. What is the bridge there between a person's own purpose and their values and vision, and how is that important to the work of championing governance and accountability? And in our context, we're talking organizational.
Yeah, so I think it's really important the question you've asked, because oftentimes people focus on sort of the what they view to be the measurable, practical things of getting the job done, making a certain level of sales, a certain measure on the sales that you have, on the revenue that you make, how many clients you sign up, and they tend to ignore what they consider to be the softer issues. They consider it to be sort of pie in the sky. It's not really something tangible that they can touch and feel. And as a consequence, they don't consider it to be so important. But the important thing with values is really values inform our behavioral conduct, what we consider to be acceptable in how we conduct ourselves. It also informs our expectation of the people that we interact with. And of course, that in turn affects the culture of our group, our society, community, organization. And that, as a consequence, directly affects the relationships we have with colleagues, with customers, and other key stakeholders, whether they're shareholders or regulators, etc. So I think it's really important, especially for long-term achievements. If we're looking beyond short-term gains, it's important to be clear on that. And of course, the people that you align yourself with, that you gravitate towards, that you form lifelong and lasting bonds with, whether friends, business partners, stakeholders. It's really important as a foundation.
This is so key. Charles, when you said, because we tend to focus on, okay, so what's the strategy? What are the systems? What is everything else that is associated with performance and results, other than people, who are the single most important determinant of success? And you said not just short term, right, results, but long
Indeed.
term success. There is this phrase that's coined that culture will eat strategy for lunch. And I feel like you just answered that if we do not start with the people, right, the values and the culture, then everything else you're looking to build in an organization can be brought down. For those who may not have heard this saying before, what does that mean? Culture eats strategy for lunch.
Well, yeah, that's a really good quote from Peter Drucker, a professor in
Yes.
marketing, business development, really great guru there. So, of course, strategy, we're looking at, what is our general plan to achieve one or more long-term objectives, goals that we have to achieve in, uncertain, changing operating environment. And culture, as we said, is heavily dependent on the values that inform our day-to-day behavior, the norms, what is expected for one to fit into an environment, and what do we expect of other stakeholders. So the important thing of this statement is really it underlines, underpins the point that no matter how great your strategy is, it
Mm-hmm.
ultimately depends on the people that implement and execute the strategy, and the culture and environment they've created in which to work. So no matter how great it is, either if you have a poor culture in the environment, either you will achieve very little on a great strategy, or the culture that you have will erode the gains that you've managed to make with that strategy.
Mm.
So culture and
Oh, that's
values are priority, must come first. We must have that in place before we have, the great strategies, etc.
what does that look like? Because for small and large, small businesses and large corporates alike, when you're going through business development courses, right, your trainings and the certifications, you're taught everything but, right. And maybe you might have governance tucked in as a module, um, but what does it look like if you say, above all else, build a value based culture? In practice, what can a business leader do to prioritize value based culture?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Of course, managers, executives, employees, they all have these dashboards and metrics that they have to meet.
Mm.
Like you said, how many sales are you making in each month? How much revenue are you generating? And somehow they can directly relate to that. And yet, with culture and values, it becomes a little bit difficult. So what I try to say to people is, if you imagine yourself or your colleagues, your friends, your family, you I can clearly identify the character of an individual person. That they're honest, they're very creative, they're dynamic, they're trustworthy, etc. So, as an organization, we as a collective also form a personality, a character that people can quickly identify, that is
Mm,
problematic, that is not reliable, dependable, or one that is
mm,
dependable, trustworthy, and that they want to build a long term relationship with. So
mm,
we have to imagine the organization is an artificial or corporate individual. So that individual has a character based on how we behave collectively. So we have to be mindful of that, and we need to be able to make observations. Of course, a lot of them can be anecdotal. We don't have hard data maybe most of the times, but we can clearly say that, look, usually people are not being honest, or people are being, there's a lot of inertia, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of bullying or whatever's going on in the environment. So, fortunately, nowadays there are a lot of models that can be used, for example, to survey the workplace, to be able to get sort of a hard numbers, charts that we can refer to see what type of culture is dominant, whether we've got a negative culture, a constructive culture, a positive culture in the organization, and to look at various levers that we can tap on, that we can press into to affect the culture in a positive way, to get the sort of change that we need to see in the environment. And maybe I can give some examples of situations what we tend to find some of these influences. So at an individual level, we might see that whether or not a person has clarity around their role, whether they're motivated and satisfied in the work that they're doing, and whether they see themselves working in the long term and staying in that organization. Is it a place where they have a sense of belonging? Or is it a situation where they're stressed out? There's job insecurity. They're not sure whether the job they're going to be there for long. Some of these factors will definitely influence the sort of culture that then develops in this organization. Is it a passive one? Are people avoiding responsibility? Are people um, looking to be very conventional and not put their head above the parapet, as it were, because they don't want to rock the boat, so to speak.
um, I heard you, and I'm really, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm imagining, um, a business leader listening and saying, "Okay, fine. I heard you talking about, the metrics and everything to measure culture, so that you can really see what kind of culture a business exists in and how they can change it. But show me the money. How is investing in culture?" And especially in this identity that we want to put out, how does that translate to the things that we are being measured and rewarded for?
Yeah, that's a really important point. People want to know, what's in it for me? How is it going to impact the business?
Mm,
So it's really interesting that a lot of research, for example, with a lot of uh, listed companies on various stock exchanges, surveys has been done, because you can easily access their financials, see how they're performing,
yeah.
and then try to measure that against their sort of performance on the culture index. Whether they have a positive culture, a constructive culture, or whether we see sort of maybe passive or aggressive cultures, negative culture coming through.
Mm,
And it's been observed in various studies, for example, that the performance of businesses financially in terms of profitability that have positive scores on their culture, in terms of the satisfaction of employees, the perception and experience of customers,
mm,
has been has far outperformed those that have performed negatively on on their culture and value scores. It's also been observed that the reputation, the performance, and the trust in the brand, the sustainability of that brand, the loyalty, the affiliation that stakeholders have with those brands, has also performed better. So we've got profitability, we've got brand recognition and trust, and then we've also got, for example, staff retention,
mm,
because you find that people can self-actualize in these environments, that they have a sense of being encouraged, a sense of affiliation and belonging in that environment. So your staff retention tends to go up. And of course, the personal growth of the employees, because they're not stressed, they're not feeling negative about the business and the place of work, they tend to achieve better results, which help them to grow, and their personal growth translates to growth for the business and vice versa.
So I'm convinced, obviously, because we share values, and this is to us a non-negotiable one. Um, I'm imagining a dysfunctional organization and a dysfunctional culture. Matter of fact, I could even say not just organizational culture, dysfunctional market culture. Um,
Right.
and we've got leaders thinking this makes a lot of sense, so that instead of putting out fires when things aren't working, we start building our businesses, we build our organizations on values, building the kind of culture that will not just deliver short term but long term results. Um, but what is the cost if we don't? We're still doing business, right?
Uh-huh. Yep, yep. Yeah, I think what people might not recognize is that there's an actual cost to a failure to act in this area.
Mm,
And some typical things that we can observe is the development of certain cultural features that we don't want to ideally observe in a workplace. So some workplaces are competitive in a negative way, where people look at competition in the workplace from a win-lose perspective. Sometimes the people are very oppositional, so people are trying to generate ideas, be creative, be innovative, and people simply oppose, maybe just to put others down, so they don't feel less threatened by them, that they don't progress ahead of them in the workplace. They feel insecure in their job. Some play power dynamics,
mm,
protecting their space, looking at self-interest. Sometimes there's a perfectionist sort of influence to an extent, where people are scared to make mistakes.
mm,
It's good to do an excellent job, but we can't do it to a point where we're not willing to take risks, because obviously there's a reward that comes with that. So the cost obviously then comes in people not taking responsibility, not being accountable. So to avoid responsibility, they avoid certain tasks and leave it for other people to do. This is of course made worse if there's a lack of clarity around their role in the organization, or there's conflict between what they should do and what others should do. Also, if people stick to convention, so people don't want to rock the boat, so
mm,
they'll always stick to the conventional way of doing things, because it's not going to ruffle any feathers.
mm,
So as a consequence, there's a lack of innovation, there's a lack of dynamism. Also, even this issue of not taking responsibility. If you've got that culture where people are not being responsible and accountable, people will not be willing to take decisions. They'll avoid that, and as a consequence, always look for approval. So, I come to Modesta, maybe she's my director or manager, and I'm always getting an approval. So if it goes wrong, I say, "Oh, but you said, oh," rather
mm,
than saying, "Look, I thought this would be best for the customer and for our business," and I took the decision. Unfortunately, it wasn't the best, and I'm willing to take the responsibility. So, of course, when you're willing to take responsibility, you will also put yourself in a position where you can reap the rewards, the credit, and the benefits that come with the actions that you take. So, of course, there's a cost in that. We lose the potential value that people can bring when they're fully allowed to bring the talents for which we recruited them. We recruit people because they've
yeah.
got great skills, education, experience, and yet we then stifle that. So we lose that benefit, and then of course we also have a cost where the negative behaviors also bring about certain negative costs. For example, losing customers, incurring liabilities because of costs and losses that customers might incur because of our inefficiencies and lack of effectiveness in servicing them and providing the right sort of value.
That's so good. I'm currently taking, so I'm doing my MBA. Ah. And I'm
Oh,
taking
fantastic.
managerial economics,
Yeah,
and we're talking about economic costs, which are different from accounting costs, right? The opportunity
right.
costs. Sometimes people may just look at whatever the output is, and maybe I don't know what their benchmarks could be. Output looks, average, comparable, competitive, yet there's an opportunity cost, right? That you could optimize your output really by investing in stronger, positive, ethical cultures, um, and accountability, and stronger governance and controls. And I think sometimes, if you have the mind of where else are we leaving money on the table, where else are we leaving well-being on the table, where else are we leaving impact on the table, uh, not just to exist
Yes.
and get by, but going through with a fine-tooth comb and saying, how can we be better? It would unearth a lot of the things that you're saying, that it's not okay to just exist, it's not okay to just be. The cost is far greater than people may realize, because they may just be looking at the accounting cost, and there could be an economic cost, there could be an opportunity cost of really unleashing people's potential of well-being in the workplace, and being an industry leader, and impacting. um, so when you responded, it made me
Yes.
think of that. Sometimes we think, well, I'm not losing, I'm doing all right, but you're not measuring everything that could be measured. You could be more than who you currently are.
It's true. I think people really need to appreciate that it's equally important for us to assess, understand, and manage the culture and the values in the organization, as you rightly said, so that we can also measure that the same way that we look at our management accounts, we look at the
Mm,
various financial
mm.
accounts, the income statement, balance sheet, and so on. So, we need to have a view that looks at that and sees how it affects the culture. So, understanding what our current operating culture is and whether or not it's an asset or a liability for the business. Um, and if it turns out to be a negative, if it's a liability, then of course we want to clarify what sort of culture we want to see and the values we want to see to sort of maximize our performance and effectiveness in the business.
Absolutely. Um, Charles, I'd like to ask you, from your experience, but before I do that, now that we're talking about industry standards, and I read out your profile, and I read out your certifications and your particular interest in these areas, at the beginning. Do you think when um, or let me see how I can phrase this, until um, really prioritizing culture is becomes an industry standard, and becomes an increasing measure of performance, and maybe uh, responsible business. Do you think it's really going to remain, at the discretion of individual organizations, and market to market? I want to give examples of, with now sound governance, or if we talk about ESG, and if we talk about integrated reporting, the more they have been now made a prerequisite, a standard, for responsible business, the more organizations are now sending people to train, the more they're strengthening their systems and controls to comply. Uh, do you think that that's what it will take? That there be a global move, and I know it's happening, but there's still context, there's still markets where executives feel like it's a nice to have, but it's not a priority. Do you think it'll take a global standardization, or do you see it coming from the bottom up, meaning that a critical mass of more conscious organizations and executives are coming up, that then say, look, this is the only way to do business moving forward?
Yeah, no, really, really great point, great question. We see that a lot of individual countries and regions have best practice. For example, in South Africa, there's the King Code,
Hmm.
which is really great and it's used internationally. We also see different standards across East Africa, in Europe, in the UK as well. But it's only recently, I think a year and a half ago, September 2021, where the ISO, which has so many standards on risk management,
Mm.
compliance, and various operations standards, etc., has only just issued a corporate governance guideline, um, which has the agreement and alignment of a number of different sort of institutes from around the world. So it's been only in 2021 did we have a truly global standard that was issued, which is ISO 37,000. And something that's really interesting, a consistent feature, if we look at King Code and the ISO Corporate Governance Code,
Mm.
one of the expectations is that there's a need to build an ethical culture.
Mm.
And in fact, the first thing that they motivate is that there should be clarity on the mission and philosophy of the organization,
Mm.
and that the strategy of the business should be underpinned by a set of values which are aligned to the stakeholders that they serve and the society in which they operate. So that puts an onus on the board as well as management to ensure that they are consistently, even if they modify their sort of business plans, tactics, products, services, vision, and so on, that it continues to be consistent and aligned. And then it also forces a position where there needs to be stakeholder engagement, because often enough, people will think as long as we provide, excellent genes or motor vehicles to a particular group of individuals, that's what we're going to focus on. But you have a wider group of stakeholders, your employees, the community that live in and around where your factories and offices are, and that are affected by the employment policies, the pollution policies, whatever values and that you have in your business impact a wider group. If you have negative sort of culture where people have to stay until midnight, and parents are not getting to home to their kids on time, just things like that.
Mm.
So there's also a strong shift around influencing investment policy. So, where banks will look at how businesses are performing on their corporate governance, on their values, their mission, and whether there are any indicators that there's a lack of consistency. So, even due diligence exercises for mergers and acquisitions, for people to get loans from banks and credit, etc., is now increasingly taking into account what you've just put a spotlight on. So it will definitely come from an increased expectation of best practice. Of course, the downside with best practice is that it's more voluntary at this stage.
Mm.
But I know there are legislations and courts in different environments which not only take into account the laws, but they'll look at the standards that are espoused, even if they're aspirational, in different environments when making even legal decisions. That what would have been the reasonable actions to take, considering the best practice that's promoted by your industry, even on things like values and ethics.
That is so good. For early adopters and not really early adopters, right? For people who want to live purpose driven and value based lives and leadership, this this comes as great news, especially if they've been the minority in their context. But for those that may not be fully convinced yet, and maybe are of the school of thought, well, look, as long as I bring in the numbers, what does it matter? Very soon,
Yeah,
not just that they will be compelled to, but then they will then see the difference, right? So even if it's not mandatory and but there is still that this is industry best practice, and there is still that that pressure. Everyone else is doing it. If you're also an industry leader, why are you not?
Yes, and you made a really great point. You made a really great point as well, where
Uh-huh.
you said you spoke about the bottom up sort of pressure.
Yes.
So, of course, I just wanted to add that we also have increasingly more aware consumers. So,
Mm,
consumers are more aware of their expectations. Consumers are actually willing to boycott products.
mm,
If they hear that an organization has abuse of employees
mm.
or was caught polluting an environment, they can really just walk away from that brand from a values perspective that I love the product,
Yeah.
but I'm willing not to take it if my money to that company is contributing to these sort of poor
Yes.
behaviors. So so yeah, I think there'll also be pressure from that from various angles, regulatory, consumer, stakeholder as well.
Yeah. We're definitely going to see a shift. Charles, as you know, as we're concluding, I have this question. I'm now imagining someone's, you've got a 360 leader listening, and they're thinking, well, and I'd like to turn our organization around, whether uh, they're part of a small business or a large corporate, and they have executive say. Um, from your experience, have you come into a business environment where the culture was, oh, forgive me for lack of a better word, dysfunctional, and
Right.
and you work towards helping the teams and the organization turn it around? What would you say are maybe 3 to 5 key uh, elements to a turnaround from a dysfunctional culture to an organization that is run on good governance and accountability?
Yeah, so I've observed so many different environments and cultures in the way people operate, and all of them have needed an intervention in one way or another,
Hmm.
intervention to take advantage of the opportunity of promoting the good values that are there,
Mm,
or as you say, the need to correct a dysfunctional sort of culture and mode of operation that's existing in a certain operating environment in the organization. And I'll just give one example. There was an organization I was appointed to run, and I just found that from small things to big things, the culture just wasn't fitting. We just had so many employees, each one coming from different organizations, different personal backgrounds, characters, and attitudes, and it was kind of a feel, like free for all, where
mm,
people just exhibited whatever behavior. So even small things. I'll give you an example where if I was sitting in my office, I could hear someone's music from their laptop, their laptop or their phone playing from several offices
wow.
down the hallway, and they think that's okay. And then of course someone else is playing their own music. Um, there would be situations where maybe the receptionist has gone to take a comfort break or gone to get a cup of coffee, and a customer walks in, and you've got 3 4 employees standing talking about their social lives when the customer is standing there without being attended
Oh,
to.
wow.
And of course the attitude
Mm,
was one where it's no, it's the receptionist's job to welcome
mm,
them, to ask them what they want. It's not my job,
mm,
you know so there were just small things like that that actually you could see spoke to wider issues. So for example, um, the question of ownership. We're not owning our collective outcome,
mm.
and we're not willing to take initiative, um, and we're sort of we want even situations where, for example, people exacted their expectations for good salaries, for good increases, for getting what they felt was their right, if I could put it that way,
Mm,
and yet they were not as willing to embrace their responsibilities. So, in short, there were several factors that kind of indicated to me, even sales. So, for example, people were so hard pressed about targets that they were mis-selling to consumers, telling them untrue information about a product in order just to meet their targets of sales.
Ooh.
So we had to intervene around that. So one intervention was being clear, absolutely clear on what our values and philosophy was as a business.
Mm.
What is our mission out there in the society, and what is how do we aim to achieve that mission? What are the values that are informing our behaviors in achieving it? And even understanding that, understanding the culture. So, as we mentioned earlier, assessing, understanding, and managing the culture. So, doing a survey about what people truly value as the important values, what they expect of, for example, of their leadership.
Mm.
So, of course, people have high expectations of leadership, but they have very low expectations of what they themselves should contribute if they're not
Yes.
part of leadership.
Mm.
So we then clarified that actually everyone is a leader.
Mm.
We might have different contexts, but we're all leaders in the organization. We should embrace all those expectations that we have of leadership. We should exhibit them ourselves. So the organization I was referring to, so I thought it was best to implement Utu, like Ubuntu,
Yeah.
um, a value system that was collective
Mm-hmm.
and that people could readily identify with from a societal point of view. Because often people in their social settings, like if they're at home in their neighborhood, or with their family, they exhibit wonderful values: caring, compassionate, helpful. But when they come to the workplace, they kind of take that hat off
Mm.
and they start behaving differently because they're shareholders. They want to make demands on, they know the company has X amount size of balance sheet. And, it was about people understanding their role, that it's an ecosystem.
Mm.
And, as much as we want to take out, we also need to put in and have collective ownership. So building a meeting of minds, a consensus among the workplace, clarifying our mission, vision, values, and sort of building sort of passion around that for us to work as one unit, and to understand that the fate of all of us is, it's a collective position. It's not, we can't succeed individually as a department member while the department itself fails.
Yeah.
The two need to be balanced. So essentially, for helping people also see how there should be an integration, a collaboration as well between themselves as individuals, between departments, and of course across the organization as well.
So good. Oh, this is great. Charles,
Mm.
thank you so very much for having made the time for this. Now, if we have someone listening thinking, I really would like to hear more from you, can I reach out to you to help me really start the transformation process in our organization? What can I
Right.
tell them they can reach out to you for, and where can they find you?
Yeah, so a number of areas where I've been valued by customers in the market for helping out. So helping to develop and clarify strategy, helping to review corporate structures and governance structures, helping to conduct ethics, opportunity, and risk assessments for the organization,
Hmm.
helping to formulate stakeholder engagement strategies, and and yeah, just helping them to assess how they're performing on strategy, and to put a draft a way forward for them. So I think these are some of the areas where I find customers, clients look to me for help across different sectors: banking, mining, hospitality, non-profit and development as well, public sector.
Okay. Where do they find you? I'm going to share your LinkedIn profile with them. Can they reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Yes, no, great. You are one step ahead of me. So I was actually going to say that LinkedIn, I find, is a really great way to connect,
Mm.
and and then from there build on conversations and take them, a step further. exchange contacts and start to pursue, the various issues of mutual interest.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for really bringing the elevating the conversation, elevating what is really at stake when we're talking about governance and accountability. It wasn't just a standard that came up and it was a buzzword that's being used around the world, and then now we all have to catch it and pretend to care. You've really spoken to why each person should care. I love how you said, "Wait, you're a leader too." Right? Each person
Right.
should care, and what it means really to not just the performance results, but sustainability and responsibility and community, Ubuntu,
Mm.
ecosystem, thinking in the way we do things, and I loved how you said this is not just for the corporates, the big organizations that can afford to do this. This is for everyone, from the
Right.
individual, a small business. This should be a concern to everyone. So thank you for having made the time to join me. I pray you'll be open to connecting again in future. Um, when I went through your profile, Charles, I was just thinking, oh, I'd like to speak to him about that one. And, I had at least three other topics that came to mind. So thank you, and hope to connect again in future.
That would be great. I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charles. And my heartfelt gratitude to you, our 360 leader, for carving out the time to listen, subscribe, share, and leave reviews. As always, should you want to reach out to us, you can connect with us on www.modestamahiga.com. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Please do share this with another leader that you know this episode would benefit. And we'll see you at the next one. Goodbye for now.